district.
Right.
If it's on the other side of the house, and meaning on the other side of the meter, then yeah, there could be a potential loss of revenue. But that's going to be balanced, I would think, to a certain degree. I don't know how much, depends on the system. If it's a surface water source, you've got chemical treatment costs, those kind of things. So the less you produce, the less it costs you. There's also the pumping issue. So it's really going to depend on what part of the distribution system you're talking about, which side of the meter you're on. If you're on the districts or the community side, then it's a straight up plus. If you're on the customer side, then yeah, there could be a loss of revenue. But I think that'll be balanced out by power savings, chemical savings, pumping savings, those kind of things. So it really kind of depends. It's an issue by issue or system by system.
All right, I appreciate the discussion of that.
Thank
It's a nuance. Thanks.
Dan, I'd like to just ask you, I know that the larger water suppliers do their water shortage contingency planning, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what the small
Good question.
water companies do.
That's a great question.
Yeah, the urban growth plans and things like that, depending on where they're located again, it is area by area, depending on where they're at in the state, how informed they are. Mark can maybe help me out, I don't believe there's any requirements for a rural community to submit a specific water use plan. I may be wrong, but we haven't come across that. It really depends on how forward thinking, what the resources again they have. And you got to remember with the rural community, until you get into a 5 or a 10,000 population, and maybe even a little higher, they don't have an engineering department. They typically have a manager and several utility operators and maybe somebody in the office. So the thought process is a little different from that standpoint. Sometimes it is managed by crisis or crisis management, which I think we can throw the drought into that category for some of our rural communities. So it really varies. Those that are closer to an urban area that are outside where it's a little more, it's prevalent in the news, it's talked about. They may attend training more often to see it. Any of the training we do, we talk about the planning aspects and water use efficiency. We have several programs in the field. We have a specific leak detection program that's starting up with DWR to address where our techs go out and do leak detection at no cost. It's funded by the DWR. We have correlation equipment. So from that aspect on our side, that's what we're trying to do. But from a planning aspect, I'm not exactly sure. I can tell you who does and who doesn't.
I've been impressed with the number of different cards with different titles I've gotten from the same person in small communities around California, or one card with nearly the front covered with the titles, because people wear so many hats. It's impressive. But I do have to say, having been out in Willits earlier this week, I was really impressed with their emergency response and how quickly they've moved, how quickly DPH has been able to help them. Karen was there too. It just, that one really was impressive. And it also is a reminder that we have a twofold task. One is, as was said in the earlier panel, and I'm impressed with Tim for quoting the governor on subsidiarity, which is a word you don't hear people use all the time, particularly governors. And but I've been working on it with my grandson, who likes new words, so he can say subsidiarity now and knows what it means, which is odd for a 5-year-old, I have to say. But he's enjoying it. And so the issue is following the lead of locals and figuring out how we can give help, as opposed to being paternalistic, but also recognizing that we have the resources to be able to help, and that there are some communities that we need to help more. For us, figuring out the balance is very important, and so that's why it's helpful to have all three of you in your varying different roles of working with rural California and helping us also figure out how we can most respectfully and effectively serve. So thank you. Now I have to do a Paula Poundstone and apologize to this side of the dais. As my colleagues on the board know, I have this habit of always going to this side first, so I've been trying to compensate by going to the right multiple times as opposed to switching back and forth. So no slight intended, and I promise in the next panel I will start on this side. Ms. Spivey-Weber, do you have anything else? Okay.
Felicia, just on the point that you made, I also want to commend USDA. They have been so responsive in this drought. They always are great partners. But the example of rural development working very closely with CDPH and increasingly with DWR and the State Water Board to really collectively think about how we can solve this problem and where one can fill in on the other. And Willits was a perfect example of how collaboration across state government, but increasingly between our federal partners in the state and now at the local level, is really what it's going to take throughout this drought and to do the kind of planning that we need for our future. So I just wanted you to know how appreciative we all are of USDA as well.
I have a comment on the water usage by public water systems. We have been gathering data for, since I began here with the state, on the larger systems, on the smaller systems, an annual report on water production and water usage. Now, of course, you have to have water meters both at the well and out at the homes to be able to calculate your unaccounted for water usage. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've been gathering that data electronically and gathering it for more and more of all of the systems statewide. We're still not that close to 100% on the smaller systems, but for the large systems, let's say above 200 service connections, we're pretty high percentage of the data. And from that, we can start looking at what's happening with the unaccounted for water. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is the work they're doing paying off? Where are the real problems? So again, I think, Dan, you deal a lot with the real small systems, and they're going to be the ones having some of the worst problems this year. And we may not have the data on some of those, but the data we do have, I know we've shared it in the past. We need to talk about that some more, and making sure everybody is aware of the data we do have, and that we put the tools out there for people to look at that data, and with respect to specific systems and maybe the bigger picture too. You did ask, though, whether we require a water use plan, I think. We don't. We gather data on the water use and require the submittal of that data, but unless there's been a specific problem with source capacity, we do look at source capacity and the demand and see if they have enough water, and in those cases we can require them to take action to address that. But to answer your question, no, there's not a specific general requirement for a water use plan from all public water systems.
I have a question after all, and Secretary Ross, your comments kind of prompted me to think about this. We're going to see, we already have, and Omar, as you indicated, there's, several instances that you're already familiar with on community water system challenges and then private domestic wells, and we're going to see more and more of that. And it just reminds me of one specific situation that was brought to my attention, and just the flurry of emails going back and forth about what can be done for these individuals. Does this fund work? No, that fund doesn't work. How about this other one? And just a lot of back and forth, and just wondering if there is, and we already have quite a few task force, I realize that, but should we consider something like a strike team? Because these communities don't have, unlike a lot of water districts, don't have the ability to access this information quickly. And I'm just thinking of the instance that I was involved in. I don't even know that we had the right folks on the email chain. We may have only had, say, 3/4 of them, and it would be nice to know that there's a one-stop shop to go ahead and provide information about the challenge that a community is facing, and really do get to an answer about whether or not funding is available, or if, in the unfortunate situation, this may be, just falling through the cracks and nothing is available.
Yeah, that's what OES, that's why I said we probably should have had OES here, because in an emergency system, they switch into gear via the county emergency operators, and people running out of water in the county is a classic emergency situation that a county should have some infrastructure for. That doesn't mean that they all have it, and so that's why I want to connect on what the OES system is for that. Mm-hmm. We would be, and I think we're all happy to participate to the extent we can. Heard a dog, but in general, in an emergency for those basic human needs, that's what's supposed to happen. So that's why I'm not really sure. I know that dialogue's been happening. I also know OES has been talking about it quite a bit, and they've been working with their county emergency directors, who then work with their own environmental health or water systems. I mean, again, it seems complex, but again, coming out of local government myself, local governments are not helpless completely. They do have a political structure that they do try to use, and then we figure out how to be helpful. So I don't know, Omar, what your experience has been in terms of dealing with the county's ability to respond and then be able to ask us for the money to be able to get water to folks.
There's
It's not,
still
the state doesn't necessarily do everything. It helps with everything.
Right. I mean, there's been, the messaging from the county level is not, it's not consistent, you know,
Okay.
and so what, I had an opportunity even to read the drought bill that's being, there's a conversation over, and there's some
Oh,
additional
that was
resources
going to be my
for
next
that.
question. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, it's 1.8 million for OES,
Uh-huh.
and if that funding, you know, we can't just create another program and more staff. I mean, it needs to be on the ground. It really has to have there has to be an ability for even an organization that works with these small communities to be able to say, call this person, you know, and that there's a message, and that message is consistent, and they're empowered, and the person also speaks Spanish and other languages. So if that's what that money's for, then that's a good idea. But I don't know what that money's for. But that would be very much appropriate, and I think it would take away a lot of the fear, because if, you know, they're coming to us and they're coming to other folks, and where do they go?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we definitely need follow-up on this and a clarity of where the money goes, the responsibility lies. And if anybody's actually, some of our folks may have been more involved in the writing of those sections of the legislation, they can clarify what's intended. I've looked at it quickly, but I can't explain completely. So, Ms. Waddell.
Yeah, we do have one mechanism that's already in place. The California Financing Coordinating Committee has a common funding inquiry form. It's on the cfcc.ca.gov website. And in a normal environment, you know, we tell people that it's a very simple form. They go on, they put on what their issue is, and it goes to all the state agencies, it goes to us. And then we each look at it, and we can respond to the individual with what we have available, or the community, with what we have available that might be able to assist them with the issue that they're trying to address. So that's at least one way that all of the funders can find out that there is an issue in that community.
But we should probably get a pretty clear answer on the OES system and where money is already available, where it could go, and then it's the kind of thing that we've been doing in the drought is we should have that information, then all of us put it on all of our websites, and then, as I think Mr. Carrillo said, I totally agree, there needs to be an ability to get that information out in English, Spanish, and other languages, which again, we tend to do through the county delivery system, but doesn't mean every county has that system. So I'd love to bring you
We'd
into
love
a
to be
follow-up
consulted. I
discussion.
mean,
It would be
'cause
great.
We've heard, you know, one of the individuals we're working with, you know, went to the county and then was told to move, you know, because the problem was so big. It was the $100,000 figure. So, you know, if you're told that, I mean, there should be somebody else you can talk to.
Right, right. And the one that I'm aware of, they were told to drill a deeper well.
Yeah,
So
but I think now
think-
we're setting up an emergency water delivery
Yeah.
system. The question is how much, you know, but at least basic human needs we're going to be trying to deliver. So we do need a little more info. Do any of you know more about that off the top of your head, or should we just ping that as our highest priority follow-up thing?
I can't speak to it directly off the top of my head. What I can say is that we have staff that have been, as you know, participating in weekly, if not daily, meetings with OES. We receive calls periodically from them when they get inquiries from communities, and where we can assist, we do. But we will follow up and provide you with information on the funding specifically and what their plans are.
Yeah, I think it would behoove us all to get a one-pager or shorter out on what, if you don't have any water, who should you call, what you should do, what's the system, and then post it on all of our websites at a minimum. But let's follow up on that, because you can probably help shape it. Anything else? Well, I thank you all, not just for being here today, but for your great service. So we look forward to working with you all. All right, next panel. The Urban Water Measures Panel with Long Beach, Orange County, Pacific Institute, and the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Nice to see you all. We got some rock stars of the water efficiency world here. Really appreciate you coming. You should therefore have no trouble with the microphone thing. I'll let you get settled. Well, great. As before, I'll let you all introduce yourselves, but thank you on behalf of all of us for coming and taking the time, not just to share your thoughts with us, but with everyone who's here, and even more importantly, the many people that are listening over the web. So we appreciate your coming to talk about what can be done, and you are all in one way or another at the cutting edge, hopefully not the bleeding edge of this work across not just California but the country. So really looking forward to the panel. And I don't know, the order I have it is Long Beach, Orange County, Pacific Institute, and then the Alliance. Is that all right with all of you to go in that direction? Okay, terrific. Mr. Waddy.
Well, thank you, Chair Marcus, for having us here today. And I'm Kevin Waddy, the Long Beach Water Department General Manager. And I'm really just going to make one point today, and I'm going to try to do it as strikingly as I can with some data. And hopefully it'll have some impact. So I'm going to start off with this graph of the per capita water consumption in Long Beach over the past 50 years. And what you see there is, you see, if you smooth that out, you see a real nice bell curve, which started in the 1950s at about 110 and is currently at about 110. And it peaked in the early 1980s. I attribute that to the Olympics, I guess. But anyway, what you see, if you look carefully, you see the three droughts that we're all familiar with, and you see what happened to our water consumption during those droughts. You see kind of in the middle of the graph there, you see the 1976-77 drought, which was short-term, and we obviously didn't do much at all to change behavior in that drought because it went right back up again after that and got even higher before it finally started coming down in the around 1980. Then you see to the right, you see that very rapid drop in the 87 to 92 drought, and there we did better. That's a combination of conservation programs and also our recycling program kicking in. We recycle about 10%. About 10% of our demand is now met with recycled water, so that's part of the reason why you see that not as much recovery after the 87 to 92 drought. And then you see on the right, what I really want to talk about today is what happened in the 2007 to 2009 drought and how we accomplished that. You see there that in 1 year we dropped our per capita consumption by about 10%. And in 2 years dropped at about 17%. Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. That's the problem that I think the state of California is challenged with, is how are we going to make that happen throughout the state of California. So I'm going to talk about how you can do that and how you can't do that with this next slide. I almost didn't show this today because the top part's so depressing, but I thought I'd just bear all our laundry here because they've got high efficiency clothes washers on the list. The top table shows, based on all the incentives that we do in Long Beach, just adding them up and multiplying by how much water they save, how much water we're saving in Long Beach as a result of rebates that we did in calendar year 2013. 62 acre feet. That's out of 60,000 acre feet, so that's 0.1%. So these are important long-term programs. That's the point I want to make. These are important long-term programs, but they're not going to do anything about the problem we're here today to talk about. So these are investments that we need to be making year after year after year to where these small numbers can become significant. Now let's look at the bottom half of the table. That's what happened in 2007 to 2009. Instead of 62 acre feet, we reduced our consumption by 10,587 acre feet by doing stuff like this. Long Beach, we were very proud to, we think, lead Southern California in terms of its water conservation during the 2007 to 9 drought. This is an example of some of the least provocative things we did during the 2007 to 9. Fran's laughing. We did some things that I thought might get me fired.
But you're not going to show those to us?
Yeah.
That's mean.
We're not going to show that today. Mead's the next one. But that's Lake Warrville, as we all know, in 2005 and 2009. That's a full-size billboard that we put up in several prominent locations in Long Beach. We standardized on the stop sign, stop wasting water. Everything we did that was our mantra, stop wasting water. We did everything we could to encourage our customers to stop wasting water. This is a billboard. This is Lake Mead with the bathtub ring around it, same kind of a thing. But we used extensive use of social media, mailers, direct mail, customizing your message to your audiences. You know, people that are in college see things differently than I do. But anyway, so that's the kind of stuff we did. Quite frankly, what I'm here to tell you about is this is what the state of California needs to do, and we need to do it now. The state of California needs to do with wasting water the same thing it did with its anti-smoking campaign. The state of California should have a very progressive anti-wasting water campaign that embarrasses people who are wasting water to stop it. And that's my message for you today. But I couldn't be here without talking about our urban farmers. I'm from South Dakota, so I wish I was on the urban panel earlier. This is one of our urban farmers before and after our lawn to garden program. So this is one of the things that we're working on. Again, this is a long-term thing. We've, through incentives, changed out now about 1,200 homes in Long Beach from, you know, that water-thirsty grass to these California-friendly landscapes. And we're very pleased that our good friends in Los Angeles have a very similar program that's doing a very similar type of program. So, but again, I want to make the point, these are long-term things. We need to be focusing on things like this to get people's attention to dramatically reduce our water consumption throughout California as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you had a chance to look at the Save Our H2O?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. What's your sense of that?
It
If
needs
I
to
don't
be more
put you on
progressive than it is.
more progressive?
It needs to get people's attention. It needs to
Okay.
shake them up.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you and good morning. I'm John Kennedy with the Orange County Water District. I have some slides to show of a project we implemented in Orange County. I'm waiting for the slides to pop up here. Ooh, here we go. Which one? Okay. Okay, thank you. I want to talk about our groundwater replenishment system. It's been operating for almost 6 years now. 70 million gallons per day, advanced water purification facility. We're taking treated sewer water that's treated by the Orange County Sanitation District, our sister agency. And normally that water, or previously that water was discharged out into the ocean. We're intercepting that water before it goes out to the ocean, purifying it to a higher degree with an advanced treatment process. And then we take that water and put it in our groundwater basin, where it is later pumped out by the cities in Orange County. And I want to mention, right now we are about 12 months away from expanding the project by another 30 million gallons a day. So in about 12 months from now, we'll be up to 100 million gallons a day of reusing wastewater and helping to recharge our groundwater basin. So I think what we have here is a project that can be replicated throughout the state. We just need to find where all that treated sewage is and see if projects like this could be implemented there also. This table shows how important the state program was that gave us low interest loans. This is an expensive project. The initial project was $481 million, the capital cost, and we were fortunate to get $135 million in low-interest loans from the state. Our expansion project, $142 million, and that is almost entirely funded by low-interest loans from the state. So we worked very closely with your staff and are very appreciative of this money that helped make this project happen. This loan and also some grant money we received from Prop 13, which was the, I think, 2001 bond issue. That grant and this loan money is what really put us over the top. People come and visit our facility all the time. We get about 4 tours a week on average. And I like to tell people, well, they come down and say, oh, you guys are so smart. Look what you did. You're, you know, what a great place you guys work at. And I like to tell people we almost didn't do the project. There was actually a couple-year period where our board was on the bubble, kind of on the fence. We had people writing letters to the editor saying this project was too big and was ahead of its time. At the time, you could still buy imported water for less cost than what we were projecting here. You have to raise your rates substantially to do a project like this. And so for a couple years, our board was on the fence, but being able to get this low-interest loan and some of the other grants is what really pushed us over the top and allowed us to implement the project. I've heard a few people talk about political will, and this shows political will in Orange County, this chart. This is our rate structure, and we really significantly increased our rates for about a 5-year period to allow us to build a project like GWRS. Right now in Orange County, it costs $276 per acre foot if you pump groundwater. And I know in Southern California, there's not a higher rate to pump groundwater, I believe. If anyone's aware of a higher rate to pump groundwater, let me know in the state. But with, you know, rates like this, you can afford to do projects like we have done. And so now as we sit here today, at least Orange County Water District's customers are in a lot better shape than other areas of the state because, you know, our board had the backbone to move forward with a project like this. This pie chart just shows, I guess I want to focus on the light blue portion of the pie chart. That's the only water that we have to import into our service territory. Orange County Water District, we serve 19 cities, about 2.4 million people, and you can see about 3/4 of our water supply is local because of investments that we have made to create more local water supply, and only about 1/4, that the light blue slice of the pie, is imported water that we need to meet our total water demands every year. And then finally, I just wanted to throw out, we're also considering an ocean desalter in the city of Huntington Beach, which is in our service territory. You know, it's expensive water. Our board is debating the merits of a project like this. Maybe we will decide for our community this project makes sense, maybe we won't. But again, having low interest loans from the state would help a project like this. It's a very expensive project. So I'll close with that.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm interested in taking one of those tours, but I don't want to inconvenience you. I have to say, just from a personal level, when I left LA Public Works, we had the largest plans for water recycling in the country. And then I left that world, came back recently, and I hear that you've cleaned our clock. So I really want to go see it. And I don't understand still why, Fran does, but why we haven't gone further. So I want to come down and see that.
Yeah,
Political will, that little bar there is is important.
Anytime, and if you come for the tour, you have to drink the water at the end of it.
I've heard about that, but not a lot if the stuff with it's going to suck the minerals out of my bones, all right? Or you mean drink the stuff you added minerals back into?
We'll give you some mineral supplements right before the go.
Okay, good, thank you.
You mean because the water's so clean?
They get it so clean that it leaches the water out of the minerals out of your bones. That's for industrial use, by the way, not for serving the customers that drink.
So good morning. I'm Peter Glick from the Pacific Institute. I want to thank you for having me here today. I agree with a comment made earlier. Each one of these panels could be all day, so we'll squeeze into our little 7 minutes. But there's a lot that could be discussed. And I want to do two things.
Jorge Luis Borges. Whole idea of an entire novel in just a short story.
Okay, so the short story. I'm going to do two things. I want to make some general observations about urban efficiency and efficiency in general, and then close with some specific recommendations. I don't have slides, so my apologies to those behind me who don't have my testimony in front of them, but it's available. Obviously, this is the drought's a serious crisis, but it's also I think a lot of people are thinking of it as an opportunity. Whether we'll take that opportunity to do the right thing, I don't know. I listened last week to the governor's press conference when he and various other senior representatives of the state talked about the drought response. And one of the first questions a reporter asked was, okay, which of these things in this bill is going to produce the most water? And with all of the water experts there, they all bobbled the answer. They didn't know the answer, or they couldn't say the answer, and I'm not sure why, but the answer is that the fastest way to produce water is not to use it. Every gallon of water that we don't consume to do the things that we want to do is a gallon of water that stays in our reservoirs or our groundwater aquifers or our rivers and streams. But that wasn't the answer. The answer was, well, some of these are going to be shovel-ready projects, and when we implement them and build them, they might produce some water. And I was sort of sorry to hear that. There is a difference between the temporary things that we do during droughts, the brown lawns and the shorter showers and the not washing your car, and the permanent things that we do to permit us to do the things we want with less water, the efficiency improvements. During bad droughts, we do both of those things, and Kevin described the different kinds of responses and the fast response you sometimes get with these voluntary things, but we need to do both of those things. And the permanent things that we do are permanent. They permanently reduce the demand for water, and I'm going to come back to that. And the reality, of course, is that the conservation measures that we've already implemented statewide, urban and ag, have had an enormous effect already. Think how bad the drought would be today if our per capita water use were still where Kevin's numbers were, where Southern California was 20 or 30 years ago, or Northern California, how much less water there would be in our groundwater and our reservoirs today. But we don't think about that, and yet that's fundamental to this issue of conservation and efficiency. And my last general comment is there's been a lot of talk about shovel-ready, shovel-ready, shovel-ready. Well, lots of the things that we need to do don't require shovels. They require plumbing wrenches or rate designers or leak detectors. They don't require shovels. Okay, so that's my general comments. Specifically, we have a series of recommendations in my written testimony. I'm just going to enumerate them and not talk about them in detail. But the first is we need to establish expanded and accelerated efficiency targets. We have a 20 by 2020 target that we've talked about a lot. We're not on track to meet that target alone, and that target's not good enough. We ought to expand and accelerate that target. If this is more common in the energy world, we have more of these targets, but in the water world, we need to have more of them. Second, we need to implement comprehensive and standardized urban water pricing. We need all water utilities to adopt tiered pricing or conservation pricing, or there are a range of innovative pricing options, but we don't have them comprehensively yet. One might ask, if you don't have smart urban water pricing, whether you could really claim that your water use is reasonable and beneficial. And I'll leave that for the board, but I think it's a fair question. And we've made enormous progress at that. More and more water agencies have smart pricing, but there are still probably a quarter of the water utilities statewide that offer flat pricing or block pricing or even declining block rates. There's a very small number of left, but there's some. So, comprehensive pricing. We need to accelerate, we need to accelerate urban metering. Again, there's legislation that requires metering by 2025. Some of the cities have more accelerated metering requirements, but there are still 45 water agencies, according to data from DWR, that don't have comprehensive urban water meters in place. And the same question about reasonable and beneficial could be asked. So accelerate that. 2025 shouldn't take to 2025. Fourth, we need to accelerate the replacement of inefficient water-using appliances and fixtures. Kevin's example is a good one, but the truth is that we could do a lot more to replace existing inefficient fixtures out there. Indoors and outdoors, toilets, washers, shower heads, dishwashers, but also lawns and inefficient watering systems for outdoor landscaping. Why does this building, my apologies to the women on the panel, but why does this building not have waterless urinals?
Once they did, and there were so many complaints that it's not run by the state, it's run by a company. They took them out, and actually Art Baggett got them, bought them, I don't know, paid $1 for them each, and took them into the hinterlands for the ski resort, or ski cottages to use because they couldn't get there. So it was complaints that
Okay,
got rid of
there are
them.
ways to implement these things well and badly. I'll just make that note and leave that at that. I would also note that the Pacific Institute got a phone call last week from the Department of Water Resources, and I hugely appreciate the suggestion that we might have these data. They wanted to know if we knew how many inefficient toilets still remained in the state of California. And we could do an estimate, but we haven't. But somebody should do an estimate. It's sort of surprising that some of the state agencies haven't done these comprehensive assessments.
Well, again, that goes to the fact that water tends to be managed locally at the local level. We don't have a state overlord, but we do want to know.
But there is a need for some comprehensive data collection.
Well, there may be a need for more aggressive state action on all sorts of fronts.
Yeah.
Right.
Fifth, adopt a loading order for water. There are lots of different forms this could take. The way money is given out, this is partly, again, actually, as you point out, a local issue sometimes, but it can also be a state issue, and there are lots of ways that a loading order that can focus on conservation and efficiency as a priority is put in place. Sixth, we need to increase expenditures for water use efficiency. There are a lot of expenditures being proposed for different strategies. Not all of them are as cost effective as some of the water efficiency improvements that we know are extraordinarily cost effective. Seventh, collect more and better water use data. I've talked about this already. And then in my formal statement, there's some other policy recommendations about stormwater retention, about wastewater recycling and reuse. We might consider proposing that by a certain date in the future, no wastewater ought to be dumped into the ocean. It ought to all be used. Florida's considering such legislation. We have a tremendous amount of treated wastewater that we treat to a pretty high standard. There's a lot of conversation going on. Orange County obviously is a leader in this, but maybe none of it should be dumped in the ocean. It's an incredibly valuable resource now. And then finally, there are very strong connections between energy and water. We save water, we save energy. There are innovative ways to save money by doing both together, and we don't fully take advantage of some of those links as well.
Thank you. Excellent. Mr. Brick.
Hello. I'd like to say that drought is the best teacher. In many cases, it teaches us what we should have done 5 years ago. And it probably is also teaching us about the future as well. So today, I'm going to focus on things that will have some immediate benefit in a drought situation rather than on the long term. But California has really seen 30 years of intensive work towards water conservation. Now we need to step up that work even more and take more aggressive steps at this time. The epic drought calls for it. It really requires it. And so some of the areas that I'm going to talk about are consumers need to be more engaged. Curbing outdoor water use, outdoor water waste is critical. Indoor fixture retrofits will yield additional trackable savings. Water agency leakage must be reduced. And funding must be provided, and revenues, as much as possible, must be kept stable. Consumers have an enormous amount of misperceptions about water use, about where it's used, about very few are aware that 50% or more is used for outdoor consumption, that indoor leaks are consuming about 14% of indoor consumption, and that these things can actually be altered with effective policies. Often we communicate, the water agencies and the agencies in general are communicating mixed messages and ambiguous messages about the severity of the drought because we don't want people to be uncertain that we're not taking good care of them. We really need to send very clear signals about the severity of the drought at this time. Now, with regard to consumer education, the Alliance for Water Efficiency has a consumer website, Home Water Works, which actually has a very effective tool for going through the home, and it asks questions. It's a very graphical kind of interface, asks questions about usage, and gives people very clear estimates of what they're using based on their response to these questions. It goes through the home, and then it actually is geared for each zip code. And also, so there's a comparison at the end of what each home user is using, then what is the average use in their zip code, and then what would a good water-wise home actually be using, which is a very useful comparison. And some agencies in California have actually taken this tool and customized it for their own use, San Diego being one of them. Curbing outdoor water use is absolutely key. Outdoor irrigation is enormously wasteful in many cases and can provide for immediate savings. Adoption of aggressive enforcement of outdoor watering schedules and water waste ordinances must be common practice in every water supply or district. Now, some benefits is that I really think we've been in a drought since 2007 in California, and that we had 2 wet years or 1.5 wet years. So some of these ordinances, waste ordinances and better rate structures, got put in place, and we're fortunate for that. But more needs to be done to ensure that these are universal throughout urban communities. And fundamentally, discretionary water use, outdoor water use, may need to be curtailed if the drought continues in the severity that we're currently seeing. There's a magic to water retrofits, and plumbing retrofits are a very appropriate tool. There's still many areas of the state that have inefficient toilets, and there needs to be a consistent program. One of these toilets can produce 9,000 to 13,000 gallons of savings. So some sort of a plumbing retrofit program would be most appropriate, particularly one geared towards communities that are likely to have greater impacts from the drought itself. An effective program that could replace as many as 1 million toilets in a 2-year period of time could produce 33,000, 34,000 acre-feet per year. Now, that's a small part of the problem that we face, but it's a very significant step that can be taken that would have immediate and long-term benefits as well. We need to reduce water leakage. It was scary to hear the figures of 20, 30, 40%, 50% water waste in distribution systems. And even an average of 10% really should be viewed as inexcusable and something that needs to be addressed immediately and will have real quick benefits in terms of providing for greater reliability. This will also have benefits in terms of energy savings. The California Public Utilities Commission says that the most effective way to achieve energy savings from clean water use is through leak detection programs. So clearly this ought to be a key priority. Funding is going to be needed. It's going to need to be directed towards the most effective programs that will have immediate benefits. It needs to have indoor and outdoor water retrofitting. Rate penalties need to be considered as well as rate structure changes. Revenues must be kept stable for utilities as much as possible. Now, that's going to be difficult to do in many cases. And there are revenue stabilizing mechanisms such as drought surcharges and rate adjustments that can be used. But we need to really conquer this notion that somehow conservation is a loss of revenue to utilities. We did a project with the city of Westminster, Colorado, in which consumers were complaining about rate increases due to conservation, and we were able to document that since 1980, conservation has saved residents and businesses 80% in connection fees and 91% in rates compared to what they would have been paying without conservation. And that information is posted on our website. We'd like to help in any way we can. The Alliance for Water Efficiency is a North American nonprofit dedicated to efficient and sustainable water use. We have 399 member organizations, of which 105 are here in California, the greatest participation nationwide. And we've worked constructively with utilities, and our tracking tool has been used with many local utilities in order to monitor their 2020 compliance. We're also involved in rate structures and changes that can be conducted through the rate structure and through developing a business model that will be sustainable for utilities and for water service in the future. We have a drought paper that we've recently developed, which is available on our website at the allianceforwaterefficiency.org or awe.org, as well as other tools on industrial water waste and a lot of other examples from around the country, really providing many of the state-of-the-art best management practices for water efficiency all around the country. We're united in a long-term campaign all across North America in order to ensure greater water efficiency. California is the leader in this area. We want to work very closely with agencies and organizations in California and with the State Board in order to achieve relief from this massive drought that now confronts us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we're glad you exist. Appreciate it. I just plugged you. You may get a bunch of calls from hospitals coming up, just so you know. Conference I spoke at yesterday. Great. Questions starting to my left.
I just, Mr. Kennedy from Orange County, on your groundwater recharge, it's also a seawater intrusion barrier that's been in place for much longer than that, right? So it's kind of a dual purpose thing. What was the overall capability for future expansion of yours? The next step is 100 million, and then how far can it go?
It's been designed to go up to 130 million gallons a day. There's 2 sewage treatment plants in Orange County that the sanitation district own and operate. With this expansion I just talked about, we will be reclaiming all sewage available at their plant 1, and now we will be looking at their second plant, which is about 5 miles away, to try to reclaim water from there to get us up to the total of 130 million gallons a day.
I wanted to also mention we've convened an expert panel to look at the feasibility of direct potable reuse, and I know your people are really in tune to that. And maybe you could comment on the amount of data that you have available from your years and, well, decades of monitoring on what's coming into the plant and what you're seeing, if anything, in the groundwater. I think that's a key part of what the public's going to be asking. What do we really know?
It's all good news. We've been characterizing the sewage coming in, monitoring the treatment that we do and the water leaving our facility. Then water will stay in a groundwater basin for several years, and then we'll monitor very carefully the cities pumping the water out. So I think we're showing that the process is very safe and expandable. The key is that time where the water is in our groundwater basin and trying to shrink that to where maybe you never have to put the water in a groundwater basin before using it. And that's what we're working on now. Maybe you take the water straight from the treatment plant and put it into a potable water supply, or put it at the beginning of a conventional water treatment plant. So that's the area we're hoping we'll get in 10 to 20 years.
Thank you.
I have a question for Kevin on messaging. Who designed your messages? I've seen the full array, and there are some.
That was all internal. We have a couple
Really?
of staff that did that all ourselves.
Wow, that's impressive.
I'm sorry. Sometimes we'd get a suggestion. Those were the best ones. The ones from students at Cal State Long Beach that had really provocative suggestions. I mean, so sometimes they come from the newspaper or the publication themselves. We'd like to run this. What do you think? Will you sponsor it? So it comes from our own staff, and sometimes you get those from members of the media.
Someone the other day suggested a YouTube competition for teenagers, particularly geared towards a really good viral video about teenage shower length.
We did a
Did you
YouTube
do that?
competition.
You did?
Yeah.
Did you get a good teenage shower length
That
one?
wasn't very good.
Oh, darn.
We did they did a stalker thing with somebody coming in, like off the movie.
Psycho.
Yeah, Psycho. Yeah.
But then also, Kevin, on how much did your messaging campaign cost, and what was essentially the cost per acre foot, or
Well, I don't have the numbers, but I'll make the point that it's a very minor cost. I mean, we have a $100 million budget in the Long Beach Water Department. That's our water budget. Less than $1 million a year, so less than 1%. I don't have the numbers, but I don't want to make this sound like it's unachievable. It's very achievable for a local utility, to, at least for us, to sponsor that kind of a media campaign.
Tim?
Metropolitan during the 2007 to 2009 period was spending $6 million a year on advertising, which was Southern California wide. So that might give you some idea of the range of expense.
I would just note, typical conservation budgets overall, not just these kinds of advertising budgets, are rarely more than 1% of a water agency's budget. They're very, very low, given the potential return.
Well, I for short-term gains, I am a big fan of messaging, and I think now that we have so much more experience with water and energy, having the messages together and utilizing the messaging capability of the energy companies, which sometimes pay, they are much bigger and better at it than often than the water agencies. I don't see any excuse not to use both. One other question, and this is for any of you, do you have or do you know of some specific agencies that have these stabilization accounts to help offset their problems if they are particularly helpful or successful in reducing water use?
Well, many agencies have rate stabilization funds. Sometimes it's part of a bonding requirement or other kinds of things like that. The larger agencies, many of them do. There's also, Metropolitan, for instance, has a stewardship charge, which provides funding for recycling programs and conservation programs and other efforts like that. So that's another attempt to establish a mechanism to pay for programs as well. Another direction that a lot of utilities have been going towards is more larger demand or customer charges, which is not particularly productive often because it takes away some of the price incentives. So rates are a very tricky topic, and it really needs to be approached very carefully so that you make sure you're not being counterproductive with the signals that you send to consumers.
Yeah, I would just add, the Pacific Institute released a series of reports on rate structures in the water area, and there are descriptions of rate stabilization programs, both in the water sector and then sort of comparable examples from the energy sector where there's much more experience, and those are available on our website, but we can make them directly available to you as well.
Great.
And I would just add, for those of us in MWD's service area, we have two sources of supply in Long Beach. 60% of it's groundwater, which is relatively cheap, and 40% of it's imported. When we conserve, we don't buy met water and we don't resell it. Now, so it's not as big of a financial impact as one might think. When we had to do big rate increases during the last drought because MWD did big rate increases, most of the rate increase had nothing to do with our lost revenue due to conservation. It had to do to the increased price of imported water. Something like, out of a 15% rate increase, 13% of it was because MWD's rates were going up, and 1 or 2% of it was because of the lost revenue. So when you have a financial profile like we do, buying water for $1,000 and not buying water for $1,000 and not selling it for $1,200 isn't that big of a deal.
Got a couple questions. Kevin, I just wanted to follow up. When you did that messaging campaign, did you target like outdoor water use, which is one of the areas where you could get the greatest quickest reduction in demand?
Well, we did numerous things to do that. Yeah, we did with some of the specific ads that I can't talk about here. We did, but yes, specifically talking about don't water during the day because that wastes a huge amount of water because it evaporates. Those are some of the kind of the ads we ran in some of the local publications. So yes, yeah.
Yeah, I was, definitely thinking a messaging campaign that focuses on where's the most bang for the buck in terms of achieving the water reductions. It'd certainly be the outdoor water use. The other question I had was, and I'm inferring from your previous answer, you may not have done this, but did you introduce any type of drought rate structure at the same time as you did this messaging campaign?
No, we didn't, and that was the point I tried to make. That change had nothing to do with anything other than human behavior change. We didn't change our rate structure. It was human behavior is what caused that 17% reduction.
And you've been able to keep it. That's the even more.
We've crept up a little in the last few years. Most of that we attribute to the extremely hot, dry weather because we have some dedicated irrigation accounts, so we can specifically look at those and know that those have been increased dramatically in the last couple of years. So we know that irrigation usage is going up, and that's weather related. But you know, so we've kept it. We hope we can turn it around and bring it back down at least to where we were a few years ago.
And I wanted to follow up with Peter as well. You mentioned, I think, when you were talking about accelerating and expanding the water use efficiency targets, that we may not be on track with the 20 by 2020. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit of the basis of that comment.
There's enormous variety from district to district. Some districts are way ahead of others. I think overall we're not. I think a number of districts are not on track, and that's reporting to the California Urban Water Conservation Council. It's the water management plan, and I think a number of districts. The other piece of that argument was that a number of districts can go way beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's some of the data.
Figuring out that balance is.
I've seen that some of them are far ahead of, or have already achieved the 20% reduction, and I'm sure there's some that have.
Also, as I'm sure you know, there has been some discussion about how you actually measure that.
Yes, yeah. One final question, I think, for Kevin again. Did your customers, what type of data did they receive about their own water use? Did they get some type of comparative data with their neighbors or feedback on the gallons per day?
We didn't do that then. It was really, I was thinking about this in response to a question that Fran asked of an earlier panel. We didn't do that then because we didn't have the technical capability to do that. We just put in a new utility billing system which just went live 3 months ago, and the one we were operating in the 2007 to 9 timeframe was one that was in a programming language which was already obsolete when I started college, and I'm not kidding. So we didn't mess with that baby. But we have one now. But really, that's a broader question. What we did do in 2007 to 9, we created, and I'm going to use words to get your attention. We created multiple opportunities for people to rat out their neighbors. We did that on purpose, and we got some letters to the editor that called us not 4-letter words. I won't use German words, but. We did that on purpose, and so what we do, and what we will do again, when we get a complaint from somebody that somebody else is not doing their fair share, first thing we do is we send them a letter. It says, we don't know whether this is true or not. We just got this complaint. We hope it's not true, but if it is, please don't ever do it again. And then from there, we ratchet up, and we ultimately have the police powers of a local city to enforce it through fines and those kind of things. We've never gotten there. We don't ever want to get there. Our whole ethic here is to not become water cops. We're trying very hard not to do that. We want our community to embrace this as a new ethic, that they want to be responsible members of our city and of our planet and do the right thing by their neighbors. So we go to every step to not become water cops in Long Beach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. It's great. As has been said multiple times, we could have spent a whole day with you, but I think that was a great, and for all the listeners, a sense of some of the greatest hits and what we need to focus on. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Next, I'm going to, hopefully everybody's blood sugar is holding. We will, in fact, take a lunch break, but I'd like to start into the public comment. We did have one request for a panel to start, and I can't remember the timing we have. We have billed this workshop as all the other things that the Water Board should be doing during the drought. As you've seen, the panels that we set up have focused primarily on water use efficiency of all kinds and recycling. There's obviously a lot more in that bucket, stormwater capture, et cetera, to talk about, but there are also other things during the drought that we should be doing on the ecological side, et cetera. So I want to call up the first panel for public comment, which will have the California Coastkeeper Alliance, the Monterey Coastkeeper, the Otter Project, and the Klamath River Keeper. And I'm going to look at all the rest of the comments and figure out when we're going to take a break after that. I assure you it will be before 1 o'clock, and it will not be a full hour.
So Chair Marcus, those were scheduled to be at 1. Now I'm here, Sarah is not here, Conrad is
Oh,
not.
you were scheduled for 1.
Yeah.
All right, then why don't we take a break now and come back
Whatever
at
you wanna
1?
do.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I just thought I'd let people keep going. So we're going to take a 40-minute lunch break, come back straight at 1 o'clock.
So hard for me not to be speaking of things like this that are so I really don't want to be the water guys. Why? I don't want to be the water guys. Somebody's wasted.
I don't know if I'll say it, but you could, so